I stood at the top of the staircase, holding my breath, one hand gripping the wooden rail, the other clenched tight enough to turn my knuckles white. Below, in the kitchen, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. He won't even notice. By the time he realizes, everything will already be in our name. She laughed softly. My wife. The woman I had spent the last 50 years waking up beside. The woman who held my hand through surgeries, who stood beside me at our son's funeral, who made me oatmeal every Sunday without fail. She was on the phone at midnight, plotting something with a man I didn't recognize. Her tone wasn't soft, or scared, or hesitant. It was professional. Cold. Precise. My mind refused to process what I'd heard. But I didn't move. I didn't go down the stairs. I stayed there, hidden in the shadows, as I had 100 times back in my old life. A life she never knew about. I've got the health proxies. The insurance transfer is done. His pension's rerouted. Just a few more signatures, and we can declare him medically unfit. Then he's just a name on paper. He'll be out of the house in a week. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. This wasn't about love. This wasn't an affair. This was something worse. Calculated. Strategic. It was a financial execution. I returned to my room, shut the door without a sound, and sat down on the edge of the bed where I had once dreamed we'd grow old together in peace. I opened the drawer in my nightstand and pulled out the black envelope I had buried under the Bible and her old letters. I hadn't touched it in 30 years. Inside was a flash drive. A name badge. A codebook. And an old key to a storage unit in another state. I turned on my laptop. The one she thought I only used for checking the weather and playing chess with strangers. I connected to a secure network, entered my old access credentials, and waited. After a few seconds, the screen blinked. Welcome back, Jack. The past came rushing in. Years of training. Missions. Silent operations across borders and in offices, behind keyboards instead of guns. When I retired from the agency, I buried it all. I didn't want that life anymore. I just wanted a family. Peace. A normal retirement. Now my retirement had become the battlefield. I played back the security footage from the house's smart system. I had installed it years ago, quietly upgrading it without telling her. She thought it was just a baby monitor for the grandkids. I had cameras in every room except the bathrooms. Redundant audio backups. External encrypted cloud storage. I watched her bring the man into the living room 2 days ago. Mid-50s, graying hair, thin mustache, fake charm. He looked familiar. I scanned his face, ran it through an old database. Match found. Philip Green. Former identity theft suspect. Flagged by the agency in 2003, vanished off the radar 5 years later. Real name unknown. Suspected in at least 4 pension scams across 3 states. Now he was in my house. Drinking my coffee. Touching my wife. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. Martha wasn't just cheating. She wasn't confused, or emotional, or caught up in some romantic fantasy. She was involved in a deliberate, well-organized operation to erase me from my own life. And she almost succeeded. Almost. I knew better than to confront her now. That was emotion. Emotion got you killed. Or worse, caught off guard. Instead, I spent the next 3 hours reviewing all financial records. She had opened new accounts. Names I didn't recognize. Transferred small amounts from our savings into untraceable assets. Digital wallets. Real estate ventures tied to shell companies. I had seen this blueprint before. It was professional-level laundering. Not something a bored retiree learns from YouTube. She had help. She had resources. She had a plan. But so did I. At exactly 4:17 a.m., I sent a single message to an old contact in Virginia. Activate file, mnemonic. Within 5 minutes, the server acknowledged. The plan was in motion. And she was still asleep, 2 rooms away, dreaming of a future she thought she'd stolen. She had no idea I was already dismantling it piece by piece. At 7:12 a.m., I poured myself a cup of coffee, the same way I had done for the last 50 years. Same blue mug. Same slow pour. The steam rose, curling through the morning light like smoke from a battlefield. Martha shuffled into the kitchen 5 minutes later, her slippers whispering across the tile floor, pretending as if nothing was different. She smiled. "You're up early." I sipped my coffee, watching her. Couldn't sleep. She opened the fridge and pulled out the carton of eggs. "You want your usual? Toast, 2 scrambled?" I nodded. "Sure." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Years of training had taught me how to sit across from enemies and smile like we were friends. This was no different, except this enemy once made me birthday cakes and held my head when I was sick. She turned to the stove, her back to me. I studied her. She looked the same soft hair, same quiet hum as she cooked. But I saw it now. The small differences. The coldness in the eyes. The perfect timing of her movements. Too perfect. Rehearsed. While she stirred the eggs, I quietly opened my phone and checked the secure message. Operation Monarch had been acknowledged. Surveillance protocols were in motion. My old contact had already routed a digital trace on Philip Green. The man wasn't just a con artist. He was part of something bigger. Something deeper. I finished my coffee, stood, and kissed Martha on the cheek. "Going out," I said casually. She didn't ask where. Just nodded and smiled again. By 8:04 a.m., I was on the highway, driving my old Buick toward the storage unit I hadn't visited in over 3 decades. It was buried in a forgotten strip of industrial land outside Richmond. Back in the day, we called it 8 Dead Box, a fallback cache loaded with identities, tech, and files we hoped never to use. I pulled up, entered the old code on the keypad, and the steel door slid open with a groan. The air inside smelled of rust, dust, and sealed secrets. I found the locker labeled C4-8 and opened it. Inside, 2 unregistered laptops, burner phones, ledgers, and a black case marked Echelon. I grabbed everything, loaded it into the trunk, and headed back. On the drive, I reviewed what I knew. Martha had methodically drained small amounts from our shared accounts. A few thousand here, a few bonds there. All redirected to what looked like a real estate fund run out of Nevada, a state notorious for anonymous LLCs. From there, the trail twisted into crypto exchanges and overseas holdings. She wasn't doing this alone. This was structured, well-timed. Coordinated. She'd been planning this for years. By the time I got home, she had already cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and was on the phone with one of our daughters, laughing like everything was normal. I listened in from the hallway. "No, he's fine. Just a little tired. You know him, early mornings and routine. Still stubborn as ever. Still stubborn." That made me smile, just a little. After she hung up, I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch across from her. I needed to test the water. "You remember back in '98, I said, when we went to Phoenix for the reunion?" She blinked. "Of course. It was summer. We stayed at that hotel with the giant fountain in the lobby." "Wrong. We never went to Phoenix. We went to Denver. No fountain. No hotel." She was bluffing. "Yeah, I said slowly. And remember Greg was there? She hesitated. Greg. Oh, right. From your unit. I smiled wider. Greg never existed. I had just created him. She nodded quickly and changed the subject, asking if I wanted to go to dinner with the Hendersons this weekend. I declined. That night, while she was asleep, I uploaded every financial document I had found to the secure server. I encrypted it, timestamped it, and sent a copy to my contact. The next step would be dangerous. I needed to get her laptop. The one she never let anyone touch. It was kept in her sewing room, which she had turned into a craft office. She always kept it locked. Always. At 2:13 a.m., I picked the lock. Inside the room, moonlight streamed through the curtains. The laptop was on the desk. No password. Just a fingerprint scanner. I took a hair from her brush earlier that day, pressed it against a modified scanner from my toolkit. The screen unlocked. Emails. Spreadsheets. Communications with a law firm in Delaware. Discussions about power of attorney. Scans of forged medical records, mine. She was building a case to declare me mentally incompetent. Not tomorrow. Not next month. No. She was going to move everything out of my name, commit me to a facility, and vanish with Philip. I copied everything. All files. All evidence. I slipped the hair back onto the brush, returned everything exactly how I found it, and left the room as if I'd never been there. When I lay down beside her again, she stirred slightly and mumbled, "Love you." I didn't respond. Because that wasn't love anymore. That was camouflage. And now, I was fully engaged. Tomorrow, I would reach out to the last person I ever thought I'd speak to again. Because to destroy someone like Martha, you don't just need evidence. You need a witness. The morning after I copied her files, the sun came up just like any other day. The birds chirped, the sprinklers ticked in rhythm across the front lawn, and Martha stood in the kitchen humming an old tune from the 70s, cracking eggs into a frying pan like she hadn't plotted my legal erasure the night before. I sat at the table, nodding along, smiling at the right moments, but my mind was deep in protocol. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was preparing the strike. At 9:16 a.m., I got in my car and drove to the downtown library. It was an old building, one of the few in town that still had privacy booths in the back. No cameras. No suspicious eyes. Just books and shadows. I used a burner phone to connect to the secure server and started uploading Martha's files. I catalogued everything, the emails, the forged documents, the shell companies, even the list of passwords she had stupidly saved in a draft folder titled Household Finances. From there, I moved to Phase 2, confirming that the house had been legally compromised. Using the access code from her documents, I logged into the fake LLC site where she transferred partial ownership of our property. She had renamed it under a holding company, J&G Estates. I traced that back through 3 layers of digital camouflage until I hit a name I hadn't seen in 35 years. Garrison Trent. That was the moment the story broke wide open. Garrison Trent was more than just a shadow from my past, he was one of the original architects of Operation Monarch. Back in the 80s, he was the one who taught me how to disappear people on paper. Now he was working with Martha? Or maybe behind her. Either way, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a war. I sent a single line to my contact, Trent confirmed. Full engagement authorized. I left the library and headed to the one place I knew I'd get what I needed next, at the senior center. Not exactly the kind of place you'd think to find allies in an information war, but that's the thing, people always underestimate the old. I walked in and found Roger. 84 years old, arthritis in both hands, but still sharp enough to track a rat's movement by sound. He was playing chess with some new retiree when I sat down across from him. Need a favor, I said under my breath. He moved his knife without looking up. You back in? I nodded. He sighed and pushed the board aside. How deep? Personal. Dangerous. With possible federal heat. He grinned. Just like the old days. Over the next 2 hours, we mapped out the plan. I needed surveillance, backups, public exposure, but slow and subtle. Martha and her little network had built this con over years. If I attacked too fast, they'd scatter and vanish. No. I wanted them cornered. I wanted them exposed. I wanted them to watch it all collapse. That night, I returned home like nothing happened. Martha was in the garden, trimming the roses. She waved and asked if I'd seen her gardening gloves. I told her I hadn't and smiled like always. She looked tired. But not from work. From watching. She was nervous now. Maybe she noticed the slight difference in my tone. Maybe she knew I was hiding something. Paranoia would be my first weapon. After dinner, I went to the garage and opened the old electrical panel. Inside, behind the dusty breakers, I installed a small device Roger had given me, a remote data interceptor. Every time she used her laptop or phone inside the house, I'd get mirrored activity. Emails. Messages. Searches. The next morning, I watched as she typed something into a private browser. Symptoms of dementia in men over 70. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just building a paper trail, she was preparing to sell it. I waited until Thursday. Thursday was her book club night. That meant wine, fake laughter, and 2 solid hours where she'd be distracted in the living room with her group of suburban vultures. I sat on the back porch, sipping sweet tea and watching the stars. At 7:32 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was time. Roger walked in dressed like a local inspector. I gave him a clipboard, a badge from a now-defunct housing agency, and a reason to walk around the property, a suspected waterline tampering. While he walked the perimeter, he placed 3 microcameras, 1 in the office, 1 in the bedroom, and 1 in the hallway where she made most of her private calls. We finished in 17 minutes. I thanked him, handed him a bottle of bourbon, and walked him to his car as if nothing was unusual. Martha never even looked up from her copy of The Secret History. By midnight, I had full remote access to every angle of my own home. Audio. Video. Activity logs. And that's when I saw it. At 12:47 a.m., after the book club had left and she finished washing the wine glasses, she went into the office, turned on her laptop, and joined a video call. Philip Green was on the other end. He was in a suit, sitting in what looked like a hotel room. She whispered, "He's acting strange. I think he knows." Philip leaned forward. Then speeded up. "File the petition. Get the doctor to sign the statement. We move this week." She nodded. That was the end of the call. That was all I needed. The net was ready. Now it was time to pull the rope. At dawn, I watched the sunrise from the living room window, the same spot I used to sit with a newspaper and coffee. But this morning, I wasn't reading headlines, I was making one. By 6:03 a.m., I had all the video footage compiled, labeled, and triple encrypted. Martha's voice, Philip's face, their plan spelled out in whispers and code. The digital trail was undeniable. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. But I wasn't ready to go public yet. No. I wanted precision. If I moved too early, they'd lawyer up, delay the fallout, maybe vanish altogether. I wanted this to hit them like an ambush. Total collapse. I uploaded the footage to 3 secure drives, one of which was automatically programmed to send everything to the Department of Justice if I failed to check in every 72 hours. Just in case. Then I printed hard copies, documents, transfer records, emails, and the fake medical petitions. I placed them in a sealed envelope labeled "in case of emergency" and dropped it off at my granddaughter's apartment. She thought it was just paperwork for my insurance. It wasn't. When I got back home, Martha was already outside watering the front bushes, dressed in her usual peach robe, waving at the neighbors like she wasn't plotting to erase me off the planet. I waved back. Inside, I called an old friend from the agency, someone I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, Vincent Hale. Vincent had once infiltrated a corporate espionage ring so well, he walked out with stock options. If anyone could help me track the real scope of this operation, it was him. He answered on the third ring. "Jack?" "Still breathing." He chuckled. "Didn't expect to hear from you. I wouldn't be calling unless it was serious." 10 minutes later, I was in my car headed to meet him at a quiet retirement park 2 counties over. Vincent lived in a mobile home surrounded by surveillance cameras and solar panels. The man never truly retired. We shook hands like soldiers, brief, firm, with unspoken respect. "You brought me something?" he asked. I handed him the drive. He plugged it into his laptop and his face changed by the second. "Jesus Christ. She's working with Trent?" "She is. And she's not alone." Vincent scrolled, nodded, tapped keys like a man defusing a bomb. This is a multi-phase operation. Pension fraud, identity swaps, offshore laundering. I've seen pieces of this over the years, but never the full pattern. You've got the whole nest here. They tried to erase me. You're lucky you caught it in time." "No," I said, "they are unlucky." He smirked. "What do you want?" "I want them exposed. All of them. But first, I want to shake their confidence. Make them doubt everything." Vincent leaned back. "You want psychological warfare. I want to make them panic." That evening, I returned home and found Martha in the kitchen, flipping through the mail. She glanced up. "You were gone long." "Just out clearing my head," I said, and walked past her without looking. That night, I staged the first maneuver. At exactly 11:27 p.m., I sent a text to her burner phone, an anonymous message routed through layers of redirection. "You missed a detail. He knows." Within seconds, I saw her get up from bed. She didn't wake me. She went straight to her office. I watched from the camera feed as she turned on the laptop, stared at it for several minutes, and began deleting files. She was rattled. Perfect. The next morning, I played it cool. I made pancakes, asked her about her book club, and smiled like a man with no clue. She forced her smile. Her hands were trembling. She dropped her fork twice. By the afternoon, I activated Phase 2. Using Vincent's access, we slipped a fabricated audit notice into the email of the fake real estate company tied to Martha's operation. It appeared as if the IRS had flagged suspicious movement through J&G Estates. That was the bait. At 3:16 p.m., she got the email. At 3:19 p.m., she made a call to a blocked number. I couldn't trace it, but I caught one sentence on the audio. "We need to accelerate. He might have hired someone." She was spiraling now. That's when I decided it was time to apply pressure from the outside. I called our family doctor, Dr. Lampert, a good man I'd known for years. "Doc," I said, "I need a checkup. Today, if you can." He heard the tone in my voice and agreed. At 4:45 p.m., I was in his office. Blood tests, cognitive exams, scans, everything. When he asked why I wanted it all done so urgently, I told him. "My wife is trying to declare me mentally incompetent. I need you to confirm I'm not." He blinked, stunned. "Are you serious?" I handed him a flash drive with her documents. He read them, pale as a ghost. "Jack, this is felony-level fraud." "I know. I just need your signature. And your silence. For now." He nodded slowly, reluctantly. By 7:02 p.m., I had the signed declaration in hand. I made 3 copies. One for the DOJ file. One for Vincent. And one, just one, I sealed in an envelope and left on Martha's pillow. No note. No explanation. Just her forged petition. And the real one. She found it later that night. And for the first time since this all began, she didn't come to bed. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the tension in the house was no longer hidden. It hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire, unseen but heavy, suffocating. Martha avoided my eyes at breakfast. She didn't hum. Didn't ask about my plans for the day. She just poured her coffee and walked out to the garden like she needed to breathe something other than guilt. That was the confirmation I needed. The bait had worked. At 8:47 a.m., I received an encrypted message from Vincent. "Surveillance confirms, F. Philip checked out of the hotel. Destination unknown." He was moving. That meant they were preparing for escape. But they were too late. Phase 3 began that afternoon. I drove to the city courthouse and filed a petition to legally freeze all jointly held assets under suspicion of fraud and elder abuse. I had enough documentation to justify a full inquiry. My background as a former federal agent added weight. The clerk didn't ask questions, she just processed the forms. That same hour, Vincent triggered a leak. Nothing public. Not yet. Just a carefully curated batch of documents sent anonymously to the board members of J&G Estates, the shady company Martha had used to transfer our house and funds. Included were her emails with Philip, financial records, and forged medical documents bearing their logo. We weren't aiming to expose her to the world. We wanted her exposed to her own people. By 5:30 p.m., we got a hit. Vincent called. "They are panicking. Internal emails are flying. Someone's threatening to walk. One of their lawyers is demanding a full audit." "Good," I said. "Time to make it worse." I returned home and found Martha in her office, staring at her computer. She didn't hear me come in. She jumped when I said, "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Yes. Just busy. You seem tense." "I'm fine, Jack." I nodded slowly. "Good. I was just thinking about taking a little trip. Maybe to the cabin in Vermont. Haven't been there in years." She blinked, eyes narrowing. "Why now?" "Just a feeling," I said. "Sometimes you just know when it's time to clear your head." She didn't respond. I walked away. That night, I prepared the next phase. I printed 3 photographs. All surveillance stills. Philip kissing Martha in our kitchen. Her holding a forged medical file with my name on it. A wire transfer screen showing funds leaving our joint account. I mailed one set to our oldest daughter, another to the law firm that handled our estate planning, and the third, sealed in a plain envelope, was slid under the office door of Pastor Riley, the man who had baptized all 3 of our grandchildren. Let them start asking questions. Let her world shake from the inside. The next morning, Martha sat at the dining table with a tight jaw and tired eyes. "You planning something, Jack?" she asked. I looked up from my cereal. "Always." She stared at me for a long moment, then pushed back her chair and left the room. At 10:32 a.m., I got another update from Vincent. Philip attempted to board a private flight out of state. Intercepted by airport security due to flagged ID. Released after questioning, but he knows. We had leaked just enough to put him on a watch list. The net was closing. By noon, I received a call from a woman named Sylvia, an administrative assistant for J&G Estates. Her voice trembled. "Mr. Collins? I found your number through an old contact list. I don't know what's happening, but there's something very wrong going on here." I let her speak. She told me she had been hired 2 years ago to assist with asset realignment for elderly clients, but she'd noticed inconsistencies, sudden property transfers, power of attorney forms pushed through without proper documentation. She hadn't said anything. Until now. I asked one question, "Can you testify?" She paused. "If it comes to that, yes." I gave her a secure drop point and hung up. Now we had a witness. That night, as the house fell quiet, I stood outside Martha's office door, listening. She was crying. Not sobbing. Just a soft, restrained weeping. The kind that comes from watching everything you built on lies begin to collapse. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything. She made this bed. And she would lie in it alone. The next day, I didn't speak to Martha. Not during breakfast. Not during the afternoon. Not when I passed her in the hallway and she paused like she expected me to say something. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore, it was strategic. Every second she spent not knowing what I knew was another second she spent unraveling. By noon, I received an update from Vincent. 2 more J&G Estates employees had resigned. One of them, a junior compliance officer, left a digital note that simply read, "I won't be part of this." Cracks were forming. Martha's machine, which had taken years to construct, was beginning to collapse in less than a week. At 2:04 p.m., I sat down in the study and made a decision. It was time to confront someone directly, not Martha, not yet, but Philip. He was the linchpin. The architect hiding behind charm and fake smiles. If he cracked, the rest would fall faster. I reached out through a secured channel and found a number tied to a law firm in Miami that had previously defended Philip Green under one of his old aliases. I called, gave no name, no ID. Just left a message, tell him it's Jack. I'm not hiding. Meet me at Riverside Park. Noon. Come alone. Then I waited. The next day was Thursday. Clear sky. Cool breeze. I wore a baseball cap and sat on a bench near the old bandstand. I watched kids throw frisbees and dogs chase each other across the field. At 12:08 p.m., he arrived. Philip Green. Tan suit. Aviator sunglasses. A man who always looked like he was trying to sell you something you didn't need. He didn't sit right away. Just stood across from me, arms crossed. Didn't think you'd be dumb enough to show your face. I looked at him calmly. And I didn't think you'd be dumb enough to try the same scam on a federal agent's wife. He flinched. Just a little. But I saw it. I patted the bench next to me. You've got 3 options, Philip. Sit and talk. Run and get caught. Or try something stupid and ruin the last years of your life. He Saturday. What do you want? I want to know how far this goes. Who else is involved? And I want you out of her life, permanently. He chuckled. You really think this is just about her? I think she was the soft target. And you're the vulture who circled long enough to smell blood. Philip leaned forward, voice low. You don't know anything, Jack. This is bigger than your sad little marriage. She was already in the system before you met her. You were the retirement plan. I stayed quiet. She's been connected since '92. First husband? Disappeared. Second? Stroke, just in time for a power transfer. You lasted too long. She got bored. That's all. You just gave me everything I needed, I said softly. He froze. You bluffing. I don't bluff. At that moment, I stood up, dropped a small voice recorder on the bench, and walked away. I didn't need more. He had confirmed her past, his involvement, and the scope of the operation. That evening, back home, I entered the kitchen to find Martha waiting for me. Where were you? Out. She crossed her arms. You've been acting strange. You mean smarter? Her jaw tightened. Don't play games with me, Jack. Why not? You've been playing them for years. She froze. I stepped closer, pulled the recorder from my pocket, and pressed play. Philip's voice filled the kitchen. You were the retirement plan. Her face drained of color. I know everything, Martha. I know about Trent. About your first husband. About the Nevada companies, the offshore accounts, the forged statements. I know about the facility you were ready to dump me in. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. You think I spent 50 years building a life just to let you erase it for a payday? Jack, No. You don't get to speak now. You don't get to lie anymore. I walked past her, into the living room, where I had already set up a small projector. I clicked the remote. On the wall appeared a live feed from her office. Her face contorted. You spying on me? No. I'm documenting everything. Because when this goes to court, and it will, I want the jury to know exactly who you are. She collapsed into the nearest chair, hands shaking. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. Then you shouldn't have built a plan that ended with me wearing a wristband in a locked ward while you cashed my pension. She began to cry. And for the first time, I didn't look away. The morning after I confronted Martha, the house was silent. Not the peaceful kind, but the tense, loaded silence of two armies waiting for the next cannon to fire. She didn't come down for breakfast. I didn't go upstairs. The rules had changed. We were no longer husband and wife. We were opponents on a battlefield, and every move mattered. By 9:03 a.m., I was sitting in my study with 3 phones lined up in front of me, one for secure contacts, one for personal calls, and one for press. It was time to raise the stakes. I called Vincent first. We are going public. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, I'll handle the distribution. By noon, we had packages ready, digital dossiers containing Martha's forged medical documents, her financial transfers, the video evidence, and Philip's recorded confession. Each file was timestamped, verified, and cross-referenced to show a coordinated fraud operation targeting elderly spouses. Vincent distributed them to 4 journalists, 2 online crime forums, and 1 former prosecutor with a podcast. We didn't tell them what to write. We didn't need to. The story sold itself. At 2:17 p.m., I sat in the lawyer's office, Cynthia Harrow, a bulldog in a pantsuit who'd spent 20 years dismantling white-collar fraud cases. She took one look at the folder I handed her and said, You're not just bringing down your wife. You're about to bring down half a ring. I hope so, I replied. She agreed to represent me pro bono, on one condition. When this goes to court, I want a seat at the front. Done. That evening, I returned home to find Martha in the living room. The lights were off. The TV was on but muted. She stared at the screen like it could give her back the life she had just lost. She didn't look up when I walked in. I didn't speak. I just placed a large yellow envelope on the coffee table in front of her. Inside, a copy of the civil suit being filed against her for financial abuse and attempted identity fraud. She opened it. Read the first page. Then the second. When she looked up, her face was pale. You serious? I've never been more serious. You going to destroy me? You already destroyed yourself. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage. She didn't cry this time. She didn't scream. She just sat there, quiet, like someone who finally realized the mask was useless now. I walked away. That night, the story hit. At 7:46 p.m., a prominent legal blog published a headline. Wife of former federal agent caught in alleged elder fraud scheme, full confession from alleged partner. Within an hour, 2 more platforms picked it up. The audio clip of Philip's confession was already circulating on Twitter and Reddit. People were asking questions, digging deeper. By midnight, the story was trending. At 6:04 the next morning, I received a text from our family friend, Pastor Riley. Saw the news. I'm praying for you. Let me know if you need anything. By 7:12, a daughter called. She didn't ask if it was true. She asked how long I had known. Long enough, I said. She was quiet for a while, then added, I'm proud of you, Dad. It almost broke me. Almost. At 10:26 a.m., my lawyer called. Cynthia sounded pleased. They're lawyering up, which means they know they're cornered. What about the holding company? Already under review. IRS, DOJ, and local law enforcement are coordinating. Martha's empire was burning. She knew it, too. That afternoon, she came downstairs with a suitcase. I'm going to stay with my sister. You don't have a sister. She flinched. I need space. You not leaving. You under investigation. Her hands trembled. I never meant to hurt you, Jack. Yes, you did. You just didn't think I'd catch you. She stood in silence for a long moment. Then turned, left the suitcase by the door, and walked back upstairs. It was over. Not the legal part. Not the public part. But the illusion, the decades-long lie we both pretended was a marriage, that was gone. And in its place was only truth. Ugly. Brutal. But real. The email was simple. Subject line, one night. One truth. Message, a family gathering this Saturday. No excuses. Be here at 6 p.m. I sent it to everyone, our daughters, their spouses, the grandkids old enough to understand. I didn't give details. No backstory. Just the time and the address. By then, the headlines had already taken on a life of their own. 3 major news sites had picked up the story. Forums were filled with speculation, theories, and digital sleuths digging into Martha's financial web. Martha hadn't left the bedroom in 2 days. I heard her pacing sometimes, murmuring on the phone. At one point, she cried loud enough for me to hear from downstairs. I didn't go up. Whatever guilt she was trying to manifest was 20 years too late. On Saturday, the driveway filled up slowly. First came my eldest daughter, Karen, her husband, and their 2 kids. Then Megan arrived, alone, her face already stiff with tension. Even my brother, Paul, showed up. He hadn't been to the house in over a decade. They all filed into the living room, glancing at one another, murmuring questions. I offered no refreshments. No small talk. Just silence, until the last car arrived and every seat was filled. I stood in front of them, holding a small remote in one hand and a folder in the other. Before we begin, I said, I want you to understand something. Everyone quieted. I didn't call this meeting out of bitterness. I didn't do this because of anger. I did it because you deserve to know the truth. The whole truth. Not the filtered version. Not the polite one. Just the facts. Megan folded her arms. Dad, what's going on? I turned to the projector screen behind me. This. The first image appeared, and Martha and Philip kissing in the kitchen. A gasp rippled across the room. Wait, Karen whispered. The second image, a scanned document, my forged medical record. Early onset cognitive decline. Unfit for legal decision-making. The room went still. The third image, a screenshot of an offshore transfer. Nearly $200,000. Gone. I clicked to the next slide, an audio clip. Philip's voice, as she was already in the system before you met her. You were the retirement plan. I let it play in full. No one spoke. Martha, dressed in a grey sweater, finally emerged from the hallway. Her face was pale, her steps hesitant. Please, she whispered. Not like this. I looked at her with the calmness of a surgeon. Exactly like this. Karen stood, trembling. Is this true? Martha's voice cracked. It's more complicated than. No, I cut in. It's exactly as it looks. For years, your mother planned to erase me. Legally. Financially. Personally. She had help. And she almost succeeded. Karen stepped back, eyes wet. Megan stared at Martha like she was a stranger. Even Paul looked stunned, gripping the arms of his chair. I spent my life building this family, I continued. Every mortgage payment, every birthday, every sacrifice, it was for you. And while I was doing that, your mother was writing me out of existence behind closed doors. Martha opened her mouth again, but this time, Megan stood. No. Don't. You lied to us our entire lives. You made us think Dad was losing it. Tears streamed down her face. Do you know how close I was to putting him in a care home? Because of you? Martha crumbled onto the armrest of the couch. Paul cleared his throat. What happens now? I lifted the folder. Legal proceedings have already begun. Civil and criminal. Martha is under investigation for fraud and conspiracy. So is her accomplice. I'm pressing full charges. There was a heavy pause. Then Karen whispered, We are with you. Megan nodded. Whatever you need, Dad. Even Paul, usually detached, muttered, I'll testify if needed. I nodded once. Then turned to Martha. You built this empire of lies. Now you'll watch it collapse, with everyone watching. She didn't reply. She didn't move. She just sat there, hands shaking, as her family turned away from her, one by one. The courthouse smelled like dust and cold coffee. Marble floors, beige walls, fluorescent lights flickering slightly overhead, it was sterile, official, and impersonal. Exactly the kind of place where the truth becomes a matter of record. I stood near the back, arms crossed, watching as Martha entered through the double doors, escorted by her lawyer. She wore a dark blue blazer, modest makeup, and an expression she must have practiced in the mirror, sorrowful but dignified. But she couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. The courtroom filled slowly. A few journalists sat in the back row. My daughters were there, seated behind me. They didn't speak to her. Didn't even look her way. Even Paul had shown up again, jaw tight, staring ahead like he was waiting for a storm. Martha sat at the defense table. I took my place beside my attorney, Cynthia, who gave me a slight nod. You ready? She whispered. I've been ready since the night I heard her say, he won't even notice. The judge entered. The bailiff called for order. And just like that, 50 years of marriage were put on trial. Cynthia stood first. Your Honor, this is not just a domestic dispute. This is a case of calculated, long-term financial exploitation. The defendant, Martha Collins, used forged documents, false medical claims, and shell corporations to attempt a complete legal erasure of her husband, Jack Collins, a retired federal agent. She clicked a remote, and the screen beside the judge lit up with the first document, my forged psychiatric evaluation. Gasps echoed through the room. Then came the financial transfers, the emails, and finally, the audio recording. Philip's voice again filled the room, as she was already in the system before you met her. You were the retirement plan. Martha didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She just stared forward, blinking slowly, like she'd accepted the outcome days ago. The prosecution rested. Martha's lawyer stood, cleared his throat, and delivered a quiet, restrained defense, a denial, confusion, misinterpretation. But there was no fire. No fight. Even he knew the evidence was overwhelming. Then the judge turned to me. Mr. Collins, would you like to make a statement? I stood. Walked slowly to the front. My name is Jack Collins. I served this country for 35 years. I spent 50 years building a life with the woman you see here. And I would have given her everything, my money, my health, my last breath, if she had just asked. I paused, looking at Martha. But instead, she chose betrayal. Not just with another man. But with a plan. A method. A structure so cruel, it almost worked. She wanted to erase me. From my bank, my home, my identity. I turned back to the judge. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice. Because if this had happened to someone without my background, without my skills, he'd be in a facility right now, staring at a wall while someone else spends his life. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded once. Thank you, Mr. Collins. He recessed for 20 minutes. When he returned, he delivered the verdict. Martha was found guilty of attempted identity theft, fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and elder abuse. The court froze her remaining assets, authorized the arrest of Philip Green, already in custody in another state, and issued a restraining order. She would be sentenced formally in 30 days. But the damage was done. The moment the gavel struck, Martha slumped in her seat. Outside the courthouse, the press waited. Cameras. Microphones. I didn't stop. I walked straight to my car, where Karen and Megan were waiting. You okay, Dad? Megan asked. I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, smiled. I'm free. That evening, I returned home to silence. Martha was gone. Her things were boxed. Picked up by the state for inventory. Her bedroom was empty. The house felt strange, hollow, but clean. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to nothing. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I laughed. Not out of joy. Not out of triumph. But because I had survived. They tried to erase me. But I had written the final chapter myself. 2 weeks after the court verdict, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from a lawyer. Not from a journalist. It was handwritten, in neat cursive, on pale blue stationery, the kind Martha used back when we still wrote each other notes instead of text messages. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Jack, it began. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I know I forfeited every ounce of your trust. But I would like to see you one last time. Not to beg. Not to fight. Just to speak, to face you one more time, before whatever comes next. She left a return address, an assisted living facility on the other side of the state. A private place. Quiet. Far from here. I stared at the note for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Burn it. Let the silence finish the job I had started. But something inside me said, end it properly. Not for her. For yourself. The next morning, I packed a small bag, fueled the Buick, and drove for 3.5 hours through the backroads, past farms, woods, and forgotten towns. It was early fall, leaves turning orange and gold, the sky heavy with grey clouds that refused to rain. When I arrived, the building was clean, modest, surrounded by trimmed bushes and an artificial pond out front. A receptionist led me down a carpeted hallway to a quiet common room where Martha sat alone in a chair by the window. She looked smaller. Older. Not physically, just diminished. Like the weight of her own betrayal had finally compressed her into something less than human. She looked up when I entered. "Jack." I didn't answer. She gestured to the seat across from her. I sat down. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. 50 years of shared history between us. Thousands of dinners. Birthdays. Fights. Laughter. Grief. And now, this. "I didn't expect you'd come," she said quietly. "I'm not here for you." She nodded. "I figured. I came to make sure you understand what you did. And what you lost." She looked down. "I know what I lost." "No," I said. "You think you do. But you don't. Because if you did, you'd be asking why you ever started this. Why you thought any amount of money was worth destroying your own name, your own children's respect, and the only man who ever protected you." She didn't respond. "I loved you," I said. "Truly. Even when you didn't deserve it. Even when I suspected. Even when you lied straight to my face." Her voice broke. "I know. You had everything. And you still wanted more." She wiped her cheek. "I was afraid. Of getting old. Of losing control. Of not mattering anymore. So you decided to matter by erasing the only person who ever made you matter." Silence. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photo, us, maybe 30 years ago, smiling in the backyard, a birthday cake on the table behind us. "I keep this," she said. I didn't look at it. "Burn it." She blinked. "What?" "You don't get to keep memories you tried to destroy. You don't get to hold on to the good parts after poisoning everything else." "I'm sorry, Jack." "I am. I don't forgive you." She nodded slowly. "I didn't expect you would." I stood. "You asked for one last conversation. You've had it." I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, I stopped. "No one will remember you as a victim, Martha. That's what you need to understand. You won't be remembered as someone who was lost or manipulated. You'll be remembered as someone who made a choice. A cruel, calculated choice." I looked back at her. "And I'll make sure of it." Then I walked out. I never saw her again. It's been 6 months since that day. The house is quiet now, but not in a bad way. It's peaceful. I repainted the office. Cleared out her sewing room. Took up woodworking again. I built a new bench for the front porch, just like the one we used to have when we first moved in. But I didn't build it for us. I built it for me. Sometimes, the grandkids come visit. We play cards. Watch old westerns. Eat too much ice cream. They never ask about her. And I never bring her up. Martha's sentencing was finalized in absentia. 3 years of house arrest, asset forfeiture, full restitution to all identified victims. I didn't watch the broadcast. I didn't need to. I had already won. Because my victory wasn't about courtrooms or jail time. It was about reclaiming my name. My dignity. My story. She tried to steal my life. But I made damn sure I wrote the ending.